When Todd and the team asked me to come speak at an open source conference, I immediately said yes, and then thought, holy shit, like what do I talk about? So, you know, your typical professional speaker who says yes before actually know what to talk about. So I made something up and said the house that open source built, and I thought it would be pretty cool to show a house to begin with. So we'll start right there. There's actually some significance about this. This is not the shanty, Tokyo. That's not where I actually lived. I lived actually down the street. It's really hard to see, but in the mid-90s, I lived in Tokyo, and that's where I got my first chops as a developer. I taught myself Basic and Visual Basic, so little visual art. So this will be somewhat of an introspective activity, a little bit different than many of the great talks that have happened over the last day or so. And I think I have a challenge for you as well. So hopefully it'll be something for you to chew on throughout the rest of the day, and then you'll get into some of the real meat and bones. So some general stats about me. I've made a lot of money with open source, as many of you have, so I'm incredibly thankful for it. It's really the reason why I said yes to this. I've been married 9 years. I've had 6 successful ventures, a shit ton of failures, 5 exits. I have 2 graduate degrees. I have 2 beautiful girls. I'm not sure what that third 2 is. So 2 houses that have been purchased via open source salaries and technology, and I definitely don't know what that 1 is. But then an infinite amount of opportunity and failures behind me. So I don't, you know, I'm not here because I know anything more than you guys. I'm very much a common person. So when asked to talk about open source, I began to think, you know, to quote an incredibly famous person, me, what the hell is open source? You know, I think we all have an idea of what that means philosophically and obviously software and technically and stuff like that. So I began a journey over the last few weeks thinking about what do I really believe about open source? What does it mean to me as a person, as a software engineer, as an entrepreneur? And so I kind of took a look back at my history as an engineer to see if I could, you know, find what it meant. So here are some of the major technologies that I've used to build both enterprise-grade applications and smaller ventures. What's interesting as I kind of laid this out, and this is the ugliest slide I think I have, is that you see a mix of proprietary systems and open source ones. Again, as I shared, I learned Visual Basic in Tokyo and taught myself that, and then I got into open source stuff with Linux and Apache, and then moved to Macromedia Flash. Who remembers that shit? Man, EMCA script, man, or superset of JavaScript for geeks, but ActionScript was the fucking jam, dude. I mean, videos and animation and audio on a website, it was like mind-blowing. And then, like, the world that rejected it. Poor Adobe. So if it wasn't software, if software isn't what open source is to me, then was it a religion? And many of you are fairly dogmatic about open source, which is fantastic. But I asked myself the question, is there a level of religiosity in open source that makes sense for me? And the answer is clearly no, because my previous background and experience with software is very heterogeneous. I've discovered that for me, the best solution is the one that works. If that's proprietary, if that's open source, then fantastic. So it's not software. It wasn't kind of a religion or a dogma. Maybe it was an organizational thing. So here are some of the companies that I've worked for as an engineer. Some of you in this room actually are still working for these people. I pray for your souls. No, I'm just kidding. But as many of you know, it is a heterogeneous environment as well. There's open source stacks being used in these environments, and very proprietary, and then OHEB wireless. You guys see that? Oh no, that's just me. All right, so the wireless connection just shot out at me. I was like, ooh, shiny penny. So yes, so it wasn't it wasn't software, it wasn't dogma, it wasn't religion, it wasn't the companies that I worked for or helped start. So, like, what is it? And I can get away with this because I'm Asian. There were a couple versions that said, "the fuck," but nah, I thought not. All right, so then let's rewind. Who likes trading card games? You guys have to be braver than that. So rewind. I said, let me rewind the script then. Let me go all the way back as far as I can. Discover the roots of my open source thinking and philosophy, and to see if I could uncover something. And I think I found something, and I hope it resonates with you. So it starts with the past, and a major gift that was given to me. I've always wanted to be a business person because that's what was modeled for me from my dad. I clearly did that. I think that's the best dressed I've been in 30 years. And I'm a twin, and one of my friends this morning asked me which one was which, and I cannot tell you, which is really strange. My brother is an Agilist, a CST, for those who know what that demarcation means, and loves software as well. So I started all very early. And in Tokyo, as I shared with you, I taught myself Visual Basic. And for those who are old enough to remember, and I think there are a few of you in the room, remember those really cool choose your own adventure novels? Oh, yeah. Those things were the jam. Those things were awesome. So my first my first application I built was a choose your own adventure in Visual Basic. And you could choose to kind of follow a pathway down to save a princess or slay a dragon. Apparently, I didn't know enough logic to do both. So you had to choose, but I had this really cool animation where it was a stick figure and he just jumped and kind of swung a sword. And I just was like, my life was forever changed. But very quickly, and obviously for many of you know that Visual Basic is a Microsoft product, so not exactly open source. But something magical happened. And you kind of never forget your first Linux. Someone decided to invest in me. Despite my immaturity, and this was back in the mid-'90s when selfies didn't really exist, but despite my interest in taking pictures of myself with my pants down in the bathroom in middle school, someone came alongside me and decided to invest some serious time into my life. And this gentleman had just sold his company to Microsoft, so that was my Visual Basic connection to that. And my father introduced me and said, you know what? You're into computers, clearly, because that's all you want to do. You don't want to eat or sleep or do anything else. I think Mr. K was his name. Mr. K has something to teach you. And so he handheld me through my first installation of Linux and walked me through setting up my first server. He bought my first domain and URL. He did all the registration of the domain and fronted all the costs. I had no idea what he was doing for me. Clearly. But he invested in me. He believed that I could do something formidable with my life. And so I think that was the first thing, that open source to me is an incredibly relational thing. Despite the distance we have between the people who make pull requests on a daily basis for us, it's still a relational dynamic. I think open source means relationships for me. Perhaps sometimes we forget that. And that's why I really love that diversity talk that we just had. Secondly, the present. Educate all the things. One of the gifts that he also gave me was a never-ending gift of education, because he sat down with me and showed me what it meant to install Linux properly instead of blowing hardware up and overclocking things that shouldn't be overclocked. And I learned that writing is a fundamental part of this mechanic. It's not good enough that we write incredible code and build incredible software, and without sharing that knowledge, we really find ourselves at a deficit. For many of us, this is really our haven, our safe place. I know it is for me. My wife knows that I'm in a great place when I'm halfway naked in my dark room and I'm giggling to myself wildly about something I just wrote. But something that my friend, again, gave me was a bunch of sticky notes, because he knew that I would not remember how to install Linux after the first time. I would have to do that over and over and over again, and I had those sticky notes for a very long time, just a line of sticky notes, multicolored, and do this first, and do this here, and don't touch that. God, don't touch that, you know? And so I realized that annotation and making notes about your journey as an engineer was a very vital part of what I felt was open source. And so I began writing. I've been blogging for 13 years, every single day for 13 years, and I love it. And I started just sharing my thoughts about software development, about entrepreneurship, about being a small business person. And it's one of the reasons why apparently a lot of people follow me on Twitter. God knows why, but I think writing is a very vital part, not just writing software, but writing for others. And if I can encourage you, more of you, to write and to share the knowledge that you have, I think that you would do an incredible amount of good. So education was a flavor of what I do today, and with the Iron Yard we do that. We have an intensive code school, and we teach software to essentially green developers, people who have never really touched a line of code. And what's neat is that we teach a very heterogeneous environment. We teach JavaScript and Rails, but we also teach Objective-C, which I'm really obsessed with right now. I have a couple apps in the store and venture funded, and they're awesome. I think they're awesome. We'll see what happens. But we have a heterogeneous environment, one that's doesn't favor open source necessarily over proprietary, but that teaches kind of general engineering practices. And that's theiRonyard.com. I feel obligated to do that. But why? Why do this? It's because there's a major deficit in our industry. All you guys know that, especially hiring managers here, and there's a bunch of recruiting firms. We can't get enough quality engineers into our ranks. And it's the reason why many of us are wealthy, because we can charge an assload of money because there's just not enough people to fill in those ranks, which is fine. That's great. Software makes money. But again, I think it comes back to relationships, which is what we do at the Iron Yard. It's an incredibly relational dynamic. It's very much mentorship and counseling. There's a lot of tears the first week. We just booted up our cohort here in Atlanta, and there have already been a lot of hugging, a lot of tears, if people have left their homes to do this for 12 weeks. So we take that into consideration. We empathize heavily with the work that they have. And so education and relationships, I think, are again now two parts of what I think open source is for me, at least for me. So that's the past and the present. So let's move ahead to the future. The next generation. And no, it's not the Master System or Sega Genesis. Which, by the way, my dad captured. He bought this for me when I was younger, the first year it came out, and he actually captured on video. Now, the video cameras were like a bazooka, right? I didn't even notice on first that Sonic was like running and capturing coins, but when I did, I let out a ghoulish squeal. It's Sonic! So anyway. So what is the next generation? Is it kind of YOLO? Live to the fullest? I hate that. No, it's not like that. Who's into this? That's pretty legit, right? Yeah, it's not that either. It's family. It's relationships. It's family. This is my favorite picture of all time. For those who have experienced this either as a family person or you were part of a family who did these were incredibly arduous experiences. This is like in the 8th hour of a all-day photo shoot where I just don't give a fuck and I hate my life. My 3-year-old is going insane, and my 7-year-old is a princess and she's in her own world. My wife is just amazing. And with a smile, and I'm like that. So I think that's the next generation. It's And even if you don't have kids, it's investing in the younger crowd. When I say the younger crowd, I don't mean age-wise. I'm not an ageist. But the people who have yet to really touch software. I think it's okay to mentor a 50-year-old as a 30-something and give them life into the careers that we have received so much from. So I'm spending time with my 7-year-old right now, and we're going through lines in Ruby. Her incentive is that she gets to play Minecraft after she successfully does some lines with me. Incredible motivation. But I'm loving this is because I get to kind of peer program with my daughter, and which is why also I love like Pie Ladies and the Atlanta Rails Girls and stuff like that, because very quickly my 7-year-old will totally not give a shit about her dad and not want to learn anything. In fact, she's already mastered the eye roll, the, hey, what is, string dot reverse equal? Okay, so introducing her to gals and to ladies who love to build software is fantastic. I've got obviously 2 girls who I'd love to introduce to you, if that's your thing. But I think one of the most important thing, again, kind of rolling back, is documentation. Is writing and kind of capturing these experiences. And so I captured a video of Rowan is her name. Rowan writing her first line of Ruby. And I wanted to share that with you and just see the sheer delight. It's for a very brief moment, but of, holy shit, this did something.
Where's the plus?
She had to hit shift though. Hit shift, plus. There you go.
Plus.
What happened?
I did it, and it says success.
Good. What are you doing?
Doing codes.
Yeah. Pretty cool, huh?
You did a bit of math. See how the answer popped out. Ruby recognizes numbers, the mathematic symbols. You could try other math like 4 star 10, 5 minus 12, 4 slash 40 slash 4. Okay.
Are you a programmer like Appa?
Beginning.
I'm so proud of you.
I'm very little. Okay, so 4. Where's the thumb hurts. How do you get?
So that was that, and I've watched that 1,000 times. It's probably the reason why it has 1,000 hits on YouTube. Because her dad is watching it all the time, but if you can remember back to when that you first saw it work, you know what I'm saying? You remember that? Maybe it was too long ago. Maybe you've lost the magic, but sometimes mentoring others and investing in others brings that magic back, if that makes sense. So the cool thing about our generation, though, now, is that I have an opportunity, as well as you do, to introduce the next generation to a very heterogeneous environment. In fact, maybe heterogeneous is maybe not even the right word, to a new world where proprietary software and open source play significant roles side by side. Right now, I'm programming Sphero. Who knows what a Sphero is? Yeah, so it's this little remote-controlled ball right there, and you can kind of make it do something and do stuff and roll around the room, and you can, it lights up into like 2 million plus colors, and of course the kids love it. But the SDK is for iOS and Android, and I love iOS, so that's obviously proprietary. But I'm coding, or I'm actually giving the Sphero, the object, commands via Ruby. And it's such a literal language that even my daughter, my 7-year-old, can say, hey, I wanted to do a figure eight. And I could just go, ooh, just 1 second, be the cool dad, right? And there it goes. So on an iOS Objective-C Apple, piece of hardware, I'm using Ruby and Rails to command it to do things. Do you see this interesting mix, right, of proprietary and open source? And so I love that because I didn't grow up in that environment. I felt like the two were categorically opposed to each other, and you had to be uncompromising one way or the other. But I feel like for our next generation to introduce them to a world where those things aren't competitive, but those things play nicely is really neat. And so she'll grow up in a world where she doesn't have to find alliances. She can just do great work. All right, so what does this mean? Again, maybe it's this heterogeneous environment. But I think it just begs the question about your involvement with open source, about what you're bringing to the table, so to speak, about what your role in the larger open source community really is. And a challenging thought that I had last night as I was kind of finalizing this deck, I lied, I finalized this deck an hour ago, was what if your greatest contribution, your greatest pull request to open source and the software development community at large is your investment in your kids, your investment in other people, and that you might not be a super badass like Linus or DHH or anything like that to create an entirely new language, but perhaps it's your children who will make those big breakthroughs. Perhaps it's someone you mentored. If you don't have kids, perhaps it's some of your students. That your greatest contribution to open source is not you, it's someone else. That's almost a dangerous thought in today's egomaniacal world, but I'll just toss it out there. So 3 common themes that are present: mentorship, education, and intentionality. Mentorship, education, intentionality. The 3 things that you don't see, I think, are dogmatism, politics, and apathy. I don't think there's any room for dogmatism when we struggle so much to just ship products. It just stops us. And politics, for those in the large companies, that kills productivity on the daily. And apathy. So we have a giant problem to solve. A giant problem to solve. But I think that the intelligence in this room and the passion for great software first, open source perhaps second, or closely followed, can do it. I think we can do it collectively. And I think we'll be A-okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak very briefly. Tweet at me, bro, at Saddington. Thanks.